Awesome. Well, joining me here today is Brian Magierski. He's the founder of CerebrumDAO, an organization that's focused on improving brain health. And I know he has a very personal story behind why he started this organization. I'm excited to share more with you all today. So Brian, welcome.
Thanks, Jocelynn. Glad to be here.
So I know you have a very personal reason behind starting CerebrumDAO. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 3 kids, all girls, and my youngest, Ruby May, was born, she's 12 now, she was born with Down syndrome. And I share the story a lot because every time I do it, people are like, I didn't realize this, but people with Down syndrome face early onset Alzheimer's-based dementia, and it's 1% of the population that faces true early onset where there's literally nothing you can do about it right now. And so that means pathology for Alzheimer's dementia starts developing probably when they're in their 30s, and this happens to the population of people with Down syndrome as a whole. And pathology will start the symptoms will start in their 50s and 60s, and that's kind of when you start noticing it. And unfortunately, that population, while they're living longer, productive lives and reaching their 60s, now they're all passing away, sadly, from Alzheimer's disease. And it was just a pure frustration about 4 years ago when she also had another autoimmune condition that is a trigger for neuroinflammation, which is another wake-up call about, hey, this Alzheimer's thing is happening, and now she's like 7, and 30s is when pathology starts. Why haven't we done anything about this disease, and why don't we have any effective therapeutics for it? And when she was born, there were no therapeutics. Now you'd argue there still are no effective therapeutics, and it's like, how have we gone decades and billions of dollars and have nothing? And so it got me thinking, how can we do something differently? And how can the next 30 years be very different, and she's going to have a therapeutic for her as opposed to the past 30 years, and that kind of led me to CerebrumDAO.
Amazing. I think it's incredible that you're so passionate about making a change in the space for therapies for Alzheimer's. You gave an amazing talk yesterday here at the Decentralised London conference, and you spoke about this translational gap. The reason why so many drugs never make it to market, what some call the valley of death. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a drug developer, so I'm new to this whole life sciences and translation industry, and I've been learning quickly from, thankfully, a lot of great experts that are working with me on a variety of aspects of brain health. And I've gone down a pretty deep rabbit hole on brain health as well, beyond just Alzheimer's, and looking at all sorts of brain diseases and how the brain ages. And the reality is, when you look at beyond Alzheimer's, you take Parkinson's, ALS, we have the same situation. We really don't have a lot of effective solutions for these populations, and it's tens and hundreds of millions of people, depending how far out into the future you want to forecast with an aging population. You're like, what's going on? And you'd think, oh, well, maybe it's a money issue. But the NIH has increased its Alzheimer's budget from $300 million to $3 billion in 10 years. And not much has really changed. And so you're like, well, what's it going to take? Is it going to take $30 billion? Is that going to be enough? And the answer is, inevitably no. And so there's this concept called the valley of death, which basically says between basic research and FDA or European agency approved drugs, a lot of things fail. And when you look at the efficiency of the throughput, it's really, really low. And so it got me wondering, when we create these DAOs, what are we doing differently than NIH funding, foundation funding, impact investment funds funding coming in that's going to change the game and make it much more productive going from basic research to actual approved drugs. And when you look at the gap in between, and I found a nice article that called it the translation gap, which I think is a better term than valley of death, it pulled out these 10 culprits. And until we start looking at each of these culprits and saying, what can we do differently? How do we design around this to make these culprits go away? I think the problem just continues to get worse. And so we're thinking really hard at Cerebrum, how do we use the community of a DAO the mechanisms that come with tokens, some of these primitives that are in decentralized science now, like IP NFTs, IP tokens, some of the infrastructure layers, AI. How do we start pulling these toolings and incentive mechanisms together and create new mechanisms, right? New mechanisms to design away these problems or these culprits and improve our efficiency of driving things from bench to bedside.
It's such an important problem to solve, and one that I think so many of us working in these industries recognize. I mean, I've worked on a number of preclinical programs that never even made it into the clinic and never, touched the lives of the patients that we're working towards, trying to help. And you mentioned, the stagnancy within the drug development sphere for neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and ALS, and that's actually why I first got into biomedical research, because my grandfather actually passed away from ALS, and that was a long time ago. I was 12 years old, and he participated in a clinical trial, and he was really passionate about biomedical research and advancing the space. And I would think that there would be a treatment for ALS by now, but there's not. And so it's a problem that I really spend a lot of time thinking about and trying to find solutions for. And I think one of the real inspirations for me is this decentralized science space, where people are thinking differently and using different organizational models to try to tackle these big problems.
Yeah, and it is, it's more than just a different funding model. Because when I thought about what can I do differently, like you go through, and I've seen, and I have friends that have done this in different spaces, such as rare diseases or other afflictions, and that impact their children. And it's like you go down the path, well, should I start a foundation? I'm like, well, that could be good, but we have foundations and we still have the problem. So they haven't solved the problem. So something about that bureaucratic structure, organization structure, even though you've got a community of people donating to it that care, you still have a bureaucracy of a foundation. And there's no other mechanism in there that's solving some of these translation problems. And then you can say the same thing about a venture philanthropy, and then you can look at an impact fund, and you can find all these different flaws. And so when I discovered decentralized science and this idea of a DAO and the tokens, and I already knew about blockchains, I look at this as, Charlie Munger had this famous saying of, you show me the incentives, I'll tell you the behavior. And when you look at the incentives that exist in that translation gap, the behavior should not be surprising to anybody in terms of what we see. A lot of money that goes into research is really driven by publishing, for example, and does published papers yield translated outcomes? Not necessarily. And so what are we doing to kind of get the research that's funded actually be more likely to be translated to actual outcomes? And so that's a mechanism problem, and we have tokens, and we have communities, and we have ways to create incentives and coordination mechanisms around that. And that's, I think, the challenge of these BioDAOs and the decentralized science community is like, let's figure this out and design these new protocols around these new primitives and solve the problems. And so that's why I got excited about doing it this way, because I'm like, at least I can see, if I fast forward 30 years, if we stay on this for 30 years, we're gonna actually be disruptive and change the process, and we might actually produce these outcomes that we're trying to get to.
Amazing. Well, I am so excited for what CerebrumDAO is doing and all of your work behind the scenes. I know you have an app that you're working on as well for brain health. I don't know if you want to share about that yet, because I know.
Yeah, we can talk just briefly about it. So it's a parallel project, more of a Web 2 style application, but this kind of gets to the rabbit hole of brain health. There's a lot that you can do for your brain health that doesn't involve taking a pill. And there are modifiable lifestyle behaviors and a lot of things that we've learned. And so behavior change and how you actually treat your brain on a daily basis can improve your brain health and also its longevity, and also has effects at preventing neurodegeneration. For a lot of cases, not necessarily for the 1% that my daughter's in. It'll help her, but it's not going to stop that. So we're going to be launching an app kind of in the middle of this year for that. That's intended for the mass market, but it's also meant to educate people about their brain and start collecting data that we think we can bridge into the research environment to help accelerate solutions. So, trying to think holistically and trying to have a 20, 30-year outlook on this. And I think if you do it that way, you get some small wins, and then ultimately you can kind of get to the big prize in the end. And so we're working with some fantastic scientists, Dr. Rudy Tanzi from Harvard and Mass General, and he's the chairman of the McCann Center for Brain Health. He's a co-founder of our app company. He's also a tremendous neuroscientist and has a fantastic biotech that's working in the field of Alzheimer's with some pretty impressive candidates that should be ready for trials, I think, in the near future. So Cerebrum's invested there too. So a lot of good collaborations and a lot of smart people coming together to try to go after this monumental problem.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited about all the work you're doing. I hope I can join the app when it's out. I definitely want to have build in some healthy habits into my life as well for keeping my brain healthy. And thank you so much for being here and being here at the conference. I think it's been awesome to finally meet you in person.
I know.
Get to
After
know
all this time,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, like we've been online friends for a while, so it's awesome. Like I love it. But thank you so much for your time
absolutely.
today.
No, we're happy to be here. DeSci London's just a really fantastic DeSci community. I think it may very well be the best DeSci community in the world right now in terms of the group of people. And I've come to the meetups, and I'm always inspired every time I come to one of the meetups or conferences here.
That's awesome. Where can folks find you online and your project online?
Yeah, CerebrumDAO, so it's just CerebrumDAO.com is the easiest, and from there you can find all of our links to our Twitter, our Discord. The Discord's where a lot of the discussion happens and where we onboard our new community members. We still do weekly meetups, and so people that want to join Cerebrum, they can introduce themselves in the Discord and come onto a weekly meetup and tell a little bit about their background, and then they can get a one-on-one session with us and overlap their skills with some of our working groups. And if they want to do even part-time work or small work with the DAO, then they can get pulled into the community that way, or they can just kind of sit back and just watch and learn. But that's the best way to find us, and yeah, we're on all the socials.
Awesome, I love that. I highly encourage people to check out their website. I'm in the Discord now, and I hope to attend one of the meetup groups soon. And if you're interested in what's happening in the decentralized science movement, really encourage you to check out DeSci.London. They're doing monthly meetups, and they put on a great conference here.